So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody, depending on wherever you are joining from around the globe. Hope you guys are enjoying this Dynamics 365 Saturday event thus far. It looks amazing. I quickly listened to the last session as well, and it is truly exciting to be part of this event virtually. My kudos to all the organizers of this Power Community event. Great effort, and so glad to be here. So I hope you're in the best of health and well-being. A warm welcome to you to this Dynamics 365 Saturday session under F&O track with the title Art of Demystifying Requirements. So just to set some expectations right before we start. So today's session is just a teaser. If you are interested in learning about how to elicit requirements for Dynamics 365 F&O, or in fact any other ERP or CRM implementation. So I essentially designed the session as a 25 to 30-minute overview session, just to introduce you with some of the important groundwork we must do before we start gathering requirements in any of such projects. So a quick recap of my succinct agenda for today. We'll get started with a quick discussion on how and why the projects fail. And this discussion is essentially a preset for the notion we'll discuss in detail as for why is it critically important to get the requirements gathering right in projects. And we'll discuss some key facets, absolutely fundamental to lay out the groundwork for a thorough analysis of the project requirements. And finally, I'll conclude with some quick tips based on my experience. I'll be glad to take up any questions around the end of the session. So before we move on, I'd like to quickly introduce myself. My name is Asim Afridi. For those who don't know, I'm working as a Senior Director Solutions with a Global Solution Integrator, HSO. And as you can see on the right, I simply love traveling and exploring new places. I also like to hike and exploring trails. I'm based in Greater Toronto area, Canada, for the last 5 years or so. And honestly, I am absolutely looking forward for some sort of normalcy to get back in future when we can travel more openly and more importantly, more safely again. So I've been working with Microsoft Dynamics 365 line of business applications for a while now. And just to share with you, my work took me to places around the globe, such as US, New Zealand, Australia, UAE, to name a few places. And of course, I started my career in my home country, Pakistan. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll be more than glad to help or answer any questions you may have related to this topic or elsewhere, or just connect if you want to connect. So let's get to the chase, the art and science of our requirements gathering. So any thoughts on this snippet? This is possibly the most frequently shared comic or snippet, especially by those who work in IT, right? And I'm sure every IT professional shared this snippet at some point in their life, somewhere, Twitter, LinkedIn, or anywhere else. So look at this, how the customer explained it, which is really interesting, how the project leader understood it, which is, again, rather slightly more interesting, how the analyst designed it, which was he or she absolutely killed it. The programmer, as usual, they killed it. So and so on. You can see how the business consultant and different stakeholders did and saw the same thing from different perspectives. And on a serious note, this actually tells you why projects fail. So everybody comes with a different perspective about the requirements and the business requirements, or simply what to build. And it is extremely important in ERP or CRM projects, or any software projects for that sake, to get everybody on the same train or bus or whatever you are taking before you even embark or on your journey or leave for the analysis town. So Gartner Research, Gartner is a renowned research firm. They conducted a survey, and as per their research, almost 55 to 75% of all the ERP projects fail to meet their objectives, the set objectives which they discussed and thought they will be achieving from this ERP transformation. And this is a big number if you look at it. So either the objectives set were not right or realistic, or there may be some issues with some key or critical objectives being missed out when the ERP projects was delivered. So no matter what size of projects you carry out, or whether it's an upgrade or a new implementation, we all know that a lot of times the financial well-being as well as the reputation of an entire organization or business is at stake when it comes to business applications implementations, especially implementations such as ERP or CRM, because they have a direct impact on their customers most of the time. The associated costs for ERP project failures, they range from disruption to business to really big catastrophes. And we, in our capacity as consultants, must do everything possible to ensure the success of the projects we work on. And let me tell you, requirements are really like the backbone for all these projects. The projects better be based on a strong foundation and better have a strong backbone. So another McKinsey and Company research study, which was recently published, and showed that almost 3/4, that is 75% of ERP transformation projects, fail to stay on schedule or remain within budgets. And almost 2/3, almost 66%, have a negative ROI, which means that the returns that you have are actually negative. So besides, and you can see McKinsey has listed these 5 main reasons they identified as per that research in the slide, which includes misaligned incentives, poor project management, lack of business IT integration, missing the focus on business value, as well as the waterfall methodology or methodology related reasons. So besides the project management and lack of business IT integration, as well as the methodology related reasons, the 2 highlighted ones, the misalignment of incentives, as well as the missing focus on the business value, these really point us to a specific premise, which is really how important it is to do a thorough and exhaustive requirements coverage, as well as to validate those requirements and making sure that your requirements stated, documented, and being designed are kind of bulletproof. So oftentimes it is misaligned incentives and objectives, which is a common example we as consultants see when we go out to clients. How many times as a consultant you have been in a situation during a requirement gathering session where business stakeholders are bickering and arguing about, and between themselves arguing about requirements. They are not on the same page. And you're kind of watching in disbelief. And understandably so. So as per another survey conducted by Squarespace, in which they were trying to basically identify leading reasons for software project failures, the highest number of respondents, which was around 48%, as you can see on the slide, said that the key reason they thought for project failures was changing or poorly documented requirements. And this is, again, the highest proportion of the respondents, or the most prominent reason identified as per that research survey. So this statistic tells you a lot of why it is essential to learn the art and science of requirements gathering and how to elicit requirements better, especially in such complex and exuberant domains and fields such as ERP or even CRM implementations, which are complicated, we all know. So let's quickly look at a typical deployment life cycle for any Dynamics 365 line of business application. I think this is true for most line of business applications. And bear with me, this is just a high level depiction of the overall life cycle and different phases we generally have in a Dynamics 365 line of business application implementation. So if we take a step back and look at this slide, requirements gathering is usually mostly done during the analysis phase for most ERP or CRM projects. Sometimes it starts even before that during diagnostics when the pre-sales or sales activities are happening. And on the other hand, it may drip down to the design or at least the early days of the design, especially when you are doing proof of concept or trying to do conference room pilots to solidify your requirements. So irregardless of what your approach is and what methodology you use to implement these applications, requirements are gathered in the beginning phases of the project. And you do fit gap analysis, business processes are discussed, discovered, diagnosed, as well as mapped to those requirements in the beginning phases of the project. When you're kind of building the skeleton of your bigger program, which may even be a phased project delivery program rolling up to multiple years. So enough with the researches. Let's discover some real world scenarios or even better, real world stories. So let me tell you a story right here. So this is a happy path scenario story. Happened once upon a time. Everyone was happy, as you can see on the slides, some happy faces, smiley faces. So the story starts with one day, a happy customer waking up with an ambition to implement ERP in their organization, with, of course, the perspectives of having operational efficiencies and all that. They obviously had requirements which were vague or raw or whatever you want to call it, undefined requirements. So they ran some raw process engineering on those raw requirements with the help of a nice management consultancy firm. And then this happy customer thought that, yes, this is the moment of truth. Now we have what is called a refined requirement. After which they went on, did a bid for their ERP project, for instance, and some more happy faces arrived at the site, as you can see on the slide. So there were some happy consultants. The business analyst for the client was, of course, happy with the effort they put thus far. And developers, they are always happy, right? So they did lots of workshops with happy participants. Remember, this is a happy path story. And finally, they wrote many, many requirements documents, a lot of them, as you can see on the slide. So these documents were mapped to the processes. And of course, client thought they figured it out already with the consultants, even before the ERP consultant firm arrived at the site. At least they thought so. And then finally, the fateful phase of design happened. So this looks like a ERP fairy tale till now, right? An ideal story. What do you think might have happened next? A few months later, the program manager of the ERP consulting firm had to have this specific conversation that you are seeing on the slide with their team. So yes, the team building lunch did happen, but not in ideal circumstances, to say the least. But at least something happened. So transferring experience from consultants to clients is a core transaction that needs to happen during the ERP requirements cycle. And by the way, this is not my code. I just read it somewhere. But this resonates with me so much. That's why I include it here. So most times we struggle during requirements gathering or analyzing requirements or analyzing what a business needs due to this specific transaction somehow not happening at all. Or in some scenarios, this transaction being blocked or hurdled by some deadlocks. And we will discuss those deadlocks. So transferring experience from consultants to clients doesn't mean making clients Dynamics 365 consultants and or becoming an expert in their business. Essentially, it means coming to the same page, talking the same language, and coming to the terms and to the fact that you cannot learn Dynamics 365 nor a client's business model and all the processes in 1 or 2 weeks. It needs to be planned carefully, equipped with the right resources and tools. And this transaction referred here in this slide needs to happen if the project has to be on the road to success, which it must, right? So a, a picture is worth 1,000 words, as they say. So we all have been in similar situations in rooms during requirements gathering workshops when things go south, when stakeholders are stressed out, everyone feels they have really no idea or exactly what an idea what's happening right now. And we clearly see a lot of lost cohesion between among the stakeholders, the bigger team consisting of the ERP consulting firm as well as the client stakeholders. So if not mostly, you might have encountered at least one of such situations, and maybe slightly differently. So in a nutshell, we need to reduce the barriers to cooperation between different stakeholders. And this is really critical for requirements elicitation phase. Experience shows that the amount of process owners' involvement is directly related to the results. No involvement by the process owner yields no results. Passive involvement yields poor results. You may also observe that in projects where client stakeholders as well as the project owners cooperate and work as one team, they often produce phenomenal results. Projects where client stakeholders and the consulting team work in a non-cooperative environment or where the cooperation has barriers, they often fail on meeting their objectives. There are missed deadlines, miscommunication, so on. We all know such situations. So during requirements, we must consistently maintain a win-win partnership. We should try to build that partnerships between client stakeholders and the consulting team and amongst the bigger team working for the ERP or CRM transformation. So an example, when there are no such partnerships, for instance, during requirements prioritization meetings, the business owners are reluctant to prioritize requirements for the fear that the implementers will automatically tag requirements as must-have and nice-to-have features, and they will never implement the nice-to-have features. Whereas at the same time, consultants are reluctant to ask for priorities of these requirements because they don't want to admit that they cannot really implement all these requirements in the available time or the scope defined. So essentially, and to summarize that, ERP requirements elicitation is a very consultative process, and it should be treated so. We should ensure that the stakeholders collaborate on both the technical aspect as well as how consultations will be carried out, how the team will work together towards one common goal, which is project's success. So there is a natural tendency among ERP teams and sometimes the project owners to improve the ERP requirements gathering or analysis phase speed and speed it up by shortchanging validation activities. And believe me, this can be a very detrimental and very unfortunate decision. In ERP projects, insufficient validation efforts often lead to unnecessarily implementation of complex functionality, which is not needed in most cases. In other situations, the teams don't even realize that they have conflicting requirements, conflicting business drivers, and they don't know it early enough in the projects. And it is difficult to meet the demand for higher quality requirements and better control in project phases. In such situations, the critical technical aspects are also overlooked. I mean, things simple as infrastructure needs or technical or integration aspects and stuff like that, if you don't validate and verify requirements. The solution is simple. We need to make sure that everyone is aware of how the requirements validation and verification is defined and conducted. Hence, so we need to have requirements validation defined as the identifiable process that ensures that the business requirements are clearly describing the target solution that the client is aiming for. And the requirements verification process is confirming that the requirements are technically implementable, feasible, and the resulting architecture would design would be satisfying the business requirements defined earlier. So we need to devise practices to prevent requirements leakages as well. And what is a requirement leakage anyways? So often, and you might have faced in your experience as well, often during projects, consultants doing requirements gathering, witness requirements originating from unofficial sources, or simply as random requests that I need this, I need that, blah, blah, blah. Believe me, these leakages, even though perceived as small and hence overlooked by the best of consultants, they render the process inefficient like anything. These requirement creeps seriously affect the resulting quality of the requirements document, signed off requirement specifications. They vary considerably, and in short, there's inconsistency, incompleteness in the requirements. So the risk really here is that these invisible requirements are there, which are not fully understood by stakeholders until later project stages, and this results often in rework. So the solution here is that when a leakage problem arises, prompt actions must be taken. Project owners must be informed. A reliable and cost-effective way to confront leakages is to use process mapping artifacts and standards. You should have every requirement mapped to a process. If it's not mapping to a process, it may not be a requirement, really. So one other tip in order to do the requirements gathering as a smooth sail is to spend some time and understand all the stakeholders involved for the ERP or CRM transformation at hand. Try to envision what these stakeholders really care about. And we'll touch this further briefly down the slides as well. But truly here, we need to envision, for instance, how a chief financial officer thinks, plans, strategizes the operations and the processes of the businesses that they are running. And believe me, this envisioning exercise and notes taken from it, and you can do it alone as well. Especially, it's really useful, and especially if you validate these notes even before starting to gather requirements or even discussing requirements. You should have a vision of what each stakeholder's needs are, and that envisioning exercise is really absolutely critical. So this one's really simple yet commonly seen mistake. Plan, plan your requirements gathering and analysis phase thoroughly before you embark on this most important, and often seen most expensive phase of ERP or CRM implementation. So you need to plan scheduling. You need to plan having detailed agendas. You need to plan the participants. Who do you need for the workshops? It's absolutely critical to have the right set of people in the room when you're doing the requirements gathering. If you have the wrong set of people, believe me, you're setting yourself for failure, because you will have important stakeholders not participating in one of the most critical phase of this transformation. Verification of those requirements, process discovery, process mapping, literally you have to plan each and everything beforehand. And it will be worth it if you do the analysis phases in a planned way. And in my personal view and experience, you cannot over prepare for the analysis phase in general and requirements gathering in particular. So lastly, before we change our gears here, requirements elicitation and analysis of what needs to be built, integrated, developed, or even configured should not be limited just to requirements itself. And this is a very common mistake which happens, that in consciously on or some unconsciously the consultants focus too much on the product and the platform functionality being implemented. They care about the requirements. Oh, I need to configure that. I need to integrate that. I need to build that. I need to customize that. And they don't really care about the processes, the business processes. You need to consider the business processes. Processes, I mean, think of that. What is a process? Processes are essentially what keeps an organization, any business, up and running. And it is absolutely critical to fuse your requirements analysis with the process discovery, identifying what are the key processes, what are sub-processes, what are the process pain points, what are the KPIs, various KPIs that the client uses related to those processes, the end goals of each process. Usually there's fewer end goals or very specific end goals of a particular process. You need to identify those. And most importantly, how those processes map with each and every requirement that you come across. If it's not mapped to a particular process, it may not be a requirement really. And you may want to question whether it's really a valid requirement. So in the end, I will conclude with some tips from my end, which I hope will help you master this art as well as the science, as we say, for the requirements discovery. So first of all, say the W word, and there are a few of them: why, what, how, and but most important of those, why. Learn to challenge the requirements you come across. And I genuinely believe that this will cure a lot of ills you see or face during requirements gathering or analysis phases. In fact, most of them, in my experience. The challenge stakeholders, why is it even a requirement? Is it really a requirement? And believe me, if you do it aptly, genuinely, being detailed oriented, in your projects, you will see a difference and how effective it makes the discussions and discovery phase. Um, Learn to say why. Ask a lot of why questions during requirements gathering. Tip number two, understand the client stakeholders and their motivations behind why are you even there in that room conducting that requirement workshop. So there must be a reason they are embarking on that ERP transformation, doing that re-implementation or upgrade. There must be concrete reasons. You need to understand those motivations. And often consultants overlook this as a more of a leadership or a senior project management discussion. But believe me, these are purely consulting discussions that need to happen during requirements gathering. And you can frame these discussions as a hierarchy, starting from their mission as an organization or a business. What strategies do they have to implement that mission and vision? What goals the business has formulated to implement those strategies. And lastly, how do these goals relate with specific objectives that they have, organization objectives, various KPIs that they might have, or the processes at the most basic level. Processes may relate to either their goals or objectives. So make an effort to understand all of this. This will really help you. And if you understand it even before you start to get the requirements, that's amazing. That's the ideal scenario. So next one is be prepared. Go prepared. Even though this is consulting 101, but still, this is important facet being overlooked by quite often. And especially doing some basic research on the business. What do they do? What's their business model? How do they sell? How do they engage with their customers? Who possibly could be their vendors, suppliers, and more importantly, if they are publicly listed, there could be tons of wealth of information you can find about a company, which can truly help you in stepping up your game during the requirements discussion, and appear as a prepared consultant who knows about the business model, who knows about the business strategy, who knows about what are essentially they are doing. So preparation is really the key, and research is absolutely critical if you want to excel in a consulting in general. So the next one is, obviously, we all know a picture is worth 1,000 words. In today's age and digital era, nobody has time to read 1,000 words or write 1,000 words or hear even 1,000 words most times. So use visual aids to your advantage during requirements gathering, during requirements workshops, using visual aids such as writing boards, posters, post-it notes, colors, diagrams, flowcharts, anything which is visual, because that will explain the scenario, that will explain the perspective really way quicker than, I mean, you using the words, believe me. And another ancillary tip which I wanted to share with you related to this one is go and do some research on design thinking, which is a new, relatively new paradigm to discover and uncover and do some learning about, I mean, business requirements and what you need to build. Actually, Microsoft uses design thinking and some of those ideas, such as I mean, empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. In their latest versions of business value management workshops or catalyst trainings, if you came across those. So it is absolutely worth spending some time reading about this and seeing how you can implement the ideas of design thinking in your consulting practices, especially for discovering and uncovering business requirements. It's absolutely helpful. It's immensely helpful. And last but not least, ask a lot of questions. And I know a lot of consultants, even the best of them, shy away from this based on their intrinsic fear. Everyone has that, whether this is a relevant question. Is it a really a awful or bad question that I'm about to ask? Believe me, there's nothing like an awful question, at least not that I know of in my experience. So ask a lot of questions, prepare those questions before you meet your client stakeholders. Remember, in a requirement gathering setting, most often, especially in the beginning phases, open-ended questions help a lot. I mean, don't ask close-ended questions. Do you specifically want to do this and that? Ask them, what are you doing? What is it that you want to try and achieve from this transformation? Ask a lot of open-ended questions, especially when you are in the initial phases of the requirements gathering. So that's absolutely critical. So this really concludes my today's brief presentation and discussion about requirements gathering and some of the frameworks, some of the techniques that we can use to help us do that better. And I would like to thank you all, especially all the organizers for Dynamics 365 Saturday community event. Thank you. It looks like an amazing event. Kudos to you. So yeah, if anyone has any question, I am more than glad to answer.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Asim. I have a question. Sometime what it happens.
सॉरी, एक कोई सवाल जो है ना वो उर्दू में पूछ लें आसिम भाई से आप।
Sure,
कुछ इनकी कुछ उर्दू टेस्ट हो जाए जरा।
आसिम भाई बेसिकली बहुत अच्छा आपने बताया कि भाई रिक्वायरमेंट गैदरिंग एक वो है। मुझे एक बात पूछनी थी कि जब हम रिक्वायरमेंट गैदरिंग कर रहे होते हैं तो क्लाइंट जो होता है वो मतलब हमें उसमें से कुछ इन्फॉर्मेशन कुछ चाहिए होती है, लेकिन क्लाइंट हमें हर चीज बता रहा होता है जो कि हमारे लिए मीनिंगफुल भी नहीं होती, और इट सीम्स के हमारा टाइम वेस्ट हो रहा है या हम उससे जो है किसी और रास्ते पे निकल जाते हैं और फिर हम उस प्रोसेस को समझने में थोड़ा टाइम लग जाता है हमें। तो इस तरह क्लाइंट से जब हम रिक्वायरमेंट गैदरिंग कर रहे हो तो क्या बेस्ट, आपके अपने एक्सपीरियंस में इतना एक्सपीरियंस है तो आपने क्या देखा कि किस तरह हम क्लाइंट को उस वक्त रोक सकते हैं कि वो स्पेसिफिक रहे?
बिल्कुल, बहुत ही अच्छा क्वेश्चन है और मेरी उर्दू अभी तक इंटैक्ट है, जस्ट टू लेट फैसल नो। काफी बढ़िया उर्दू बोल सकता हूँ मैं। सो बहुत ही अच्छा क्वेश्चन है रियली अमार। आई थिंक इन माय एक्सपीरियंस में, जो मेरा एक्सपीरियंस है उसमें प्रोसेसेस बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट होते हैं। Identifying the key processes, identifying what are the key processes that they are doing day in, day out. I mean, as we talked about, in the presentation, processes ही एक business को run कर रहे होते हैं day in day out. तो knowing कि क्या important processes हैं, key processes क्या हैं, और I mean making that or using that to kind of defining your scope of discussions. Because बिल्कुल आपने सही कहा कि when we are doing the requirements, there's a clutter of information you get. I mean, sometimes, and actually a lot of times, in my experience as well, आप देखते हैं कि a lot of information, जो बहुत सारी information जो आ रही होती है, वो relevant नहीं होती towards the scope which has been defined. And again, there's this perspective. We talked about perspectives as well, that sales will give you this perspective that, okay, this is the scope. That may not really be the scope. That may really be something, I mean, slightly different from that, or something bigger or even smaller than that, right? So getting to know the processes, what essentially are the key processes, and using that as a frame to like know what is important and what is not. Because if you will know, okay, these are the processes which are key to this transformation, or जो ये processes हैं, ये 5 processes हैं, for example, cash, order to cash, या procure to pay, and record to report. These, अगर आप initially जाके ये discover कर लेते हैं कि okay, ये 3 processes हैं जो कि critical hai. These are the key processes that we need to base our discussions around. Then, I mean, you know that what's the scope. You know how you have to frame your further discussions based on the procure to pay, how you have to frame your discussions for order to cash, how you have to frame your discussions for record to report from a financial perspective. So in my experience, as Joe, as you asked, understanding the processes, processes learn करना, क्या key processes हैं, and framing, using that frame to kind of build your understanding what is important and what is not.
Okay, thanks Asim. कुछ और लोगों के भी क्वेश्चन है. अगर कोई ऐसा टूल जो कि रिक्वायरमेंट गैदरिंग आप सजेस्ट करें, कोई ऐसा टूल जो बेस्ट टूल हो रिक्वायरमेंट गैदरिंग करने के लिए?
There are a number of tools. I have mostly used DevOps. DevOps is obviously amazing when it comes to gathering requirements. I mean, defining those requirements, and I mean, having that in a more structured frame. In my experience, I have used tools simple as Excel sheets, or simply Word questionnaires, to DevOps. There are some other tools as well which you can use, but in the context of Microsoft's implementations, most clients do sign off for DevOps and utilizing DevOps as one key tool. So that's one key tool that if you haven't explored any tool, I would encourage you to get started and get some understanding of DevOps to start with. And there are a number of tools, and there are a number of advanced tools and techniques as well. Those are not really tools, I would say. So there are a number of process diagnostic and process discovery platforms, which are obviously, sometimes they are provided as ISVs and third-party solutions. They are not necessarily sometimes ISVs, they are independent solutions. But I mean, in case you are embarking on a complex project, you see that this project has a lot of complex processes. You may need to do a lot of change management, process reengineering. I would advise you to get some understanding and do some research about those process diagnostics and process mapping tools as well. Some of them are, I mean, really well known. I wouldn't name any specific as of now, but feel free to reach out to me personally. I can provide you the pointers.
Sure.
But to start with, DevOps is a good starting point. Absolutely.
Okay. Thanks, Asim. Few more questions. एक क्वेश्चन है, शुरुआत कहाँ से करें, कैसे करें? मतलब जब रिक्वायरमेंट गैदरिंग की करें तो क्या स्टार्ट कैसे करें, किस तरह पूछें क्लाइंट से, या पहले कुछ जनरल डिस्कशन करें देन स्टार्ट करें कुछ प्रोसेस की, या क्या मतलब जैसे आप क्या गाइड करेंगे इसमें?
Yep, absolutely. और ये बहुत अच्छा क्वेश्चन है, and I think I feel like we covered it in our presentation. शुरुआत best in my experience is to there are few perspectives that you need to build, and the best frame to use, is you should start knowing what are the motivations behind that ERP transformation, and we discussed that briefly, right? The mission, vision, strategy, goals, objectives, that hierarchy, or whatever you know call it. ये अच्छा starting point है, क्योंकि and why I think so. This will lead you to understand why is this transformation even happening. So this will give you a really 30,000 feet view of the overall project from an upper view, and seeing all the pieces, all different pieces. I mean, not in a detailed way, obviously, because you haven't even embarked on discovering requirements, but seeing all the puzzle pieces at the high level, right? And how they gel up, how they interact with each other. I talked about processes. I talked about identifying key processes. I feel like identifying those motivations, कि क्या motivations हैं, क्या pain points हैं जिनकी वजह से ये transformation हो रही है, whether it's a upgrade, whether it's a new implementation. There must be specific reasons. Let me tell you, in my experience, I mean, if you discuss those, and if you openly discuss and do some discovery, you will come across few specific items that you will identify. Oh, that's the key pain point. It may even be a pain point that they are having due to, I mean, various systems not integrated, a lot of manual work, so on. They can be, these are the major reasons I usually see in most implementations. So start with the vision, with what's the motivation, and link it with processes. What are the key processes? Yep. And that's a good starting point, rather than like straight jumping to, oh, I need requirements for GL. What kind of chart of account you would need? Is it a shared chart of account or non-shared chart of account? To me, I mean, you can start with that as well, but it's important. At some point, it's important to know the bigger picture. It's important for you as consultant to know the motivations and the bigger picture.
Okay, thank you, Asim. हमारे पास last 2 minutes हैं और एक last question है, जो कि ये है कि sometimes क्या होता है, हमारे पास client के पास outdated processes होते हैं और वो ही implement करना चाहता है standard ERP के processes के अलावा. तो इस पे आप क्या एडवाइस करेंगे कि किस तरह क्लाइंट को वो किया जाए, उनको किस तरह समझाया जाए?
Absolutely, and I face that day in, day out. I mean, they want to, I mean, and there's this change. It links with change reluctancy. I mean, as we say in Urdu or Hindi, I mean, change से most लोग डरते हैं. So I feel like helping them overcome that fear of change in a theoretical way. And let me give you some specific points there as well. Ask them and discuss with them why is it that a particular process that they think is the most optimal one. I mean, you may need to work with them quite a lot, honestly, convincing them that, I mean, and if you think genuinely that they are better propositions, they are better process re-engineerings that can improve that process. And that's where I highlighted processes, KPIs, understanding the motivation, and trickling down from that hierarchy of objectives, strategies to goals and processes at the base level. At the base of that, you will find processes. I mean, no matter, as you said, Amar, I mean, no matter the processes that they want to stick with, or I mean, to be processes. So getting to that discussion and getting them to that discussion is absolutely critical. And once you get to that discussion using the process frame, then you can, and utilizing KPIs as well, because KPIs is where you would able to convince them, okay, here is this, and this links with business value management workshops that Microsoft is doing these days with a lot of partners. Most implementers, they are training them on that. So again, ये idea इस चीज से link करता है कि how can you enhance the business value more? How can you improve those KPIs? And if you have those certain set of KPIs, 5 or 4 KPIs for a particular process, then you can convince that, okay, you will get a better KPI, you will get a better customer churn, you will get a better, production time, you will get a better service time, you will get a better ship time, or you will get better costs on shipping or miscellaneous expenses, things like that. Let's go on. So understanding, discovering the KPIs, understanding the processes, and KPIs linked with mostly with processes. So understanding that is critical to convince clients on such discussions.
Okay. Thank you, Asim. आपने काफी अपने एक्सपीरियंस को शेयर किया और हमारी नॉलेज में इजाफा किया. थैंक यू फॉर दैट. और ये बहुत एक इम्पोर्टेंट टॉपिक था जो कि चाहे टेक्निकल कंसल्टेंट हो या फंक्शनल कंसल्टेंट हो, उसके लिए रियली इम्पोर्टेंट था. थैंक यू आसिम फॉर योर टाइम. और हमारा लास्ट सेशन होगा क्लोजिंग सेशन, तो आप लोगों को सबसे रिक्वेस्ट है कि ज्वाइन करें हमें वहां पर और क्लोजिंग सेशन में. थैंक्स आसिम.
Thank you everyone. Cheers.
Yeah, so Amar, we got the link on the chat, so please use that link if you want to connect from here. Thank you all.
Thank you all.